Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. Ask is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. That is one thing I strive with this and all my episodes, especially for this show, the Ask Adam Live, is to remind you to always seek knowledge, to always be inquisitive, to always be interested in life in general, the life around you. First of all, understanding more about yourself, understanding more about other people, and then understanding more about your passion, whether it be your job or your hobby, or just try to learn more. Uh, Many people have asked me, um, I guess, just how I know things. And well, so much of it was because I was just interested. When I saw someone doing something, I took a minute to ask them how they were doing it, maybe why they were doing something a certain way that I didn't understand. And I always ask. So I guess that's kind of where this big idea came from, is to just always seek knowledge. That's kind of what I came up with, is that's why I know what I know. And that's why I feel it's so important to share with you, is to remind you that we should always be seeking knowledge. Now let's get into today's show. Overcoming imposter syndrome. Let me just start out by saying you're not a fraud. You're becoming. You're becoming what you're supposed to be. You're becoming your soul's purpose. Again, another foundation of what this show is all about. Have you ever wondered, who am I to be doing what you're doing? You're not alone. You're not wrong. You're just growing. Imposter syndrome, I think, has been mislabeled as insecurity. It's what happens when your identity catches up to your opportunity, quite frankly. I remember, well, I guess there was several times that, but I guess the one, and I'm really trying hard to relate, because every time I've been pointed in a direction in my life, I just kind of went for it. I knew that I was supposed to be there. So forgive me on this one if I take it slightly on the light level for this particular episode. Is I never really felt imposter syndrome. Okay, maybe a little bit, but not like everyone else. See, everyone else, or not a certain percentage of you, and let's get through this, and you'll relate as you relate to yourself. Some of us just plow through something and know, hey, we got to do it. We put the blinders on, we plug our nose, we just we do something just for the sake of doing it. Sometimes it's a matter of survival, that we just act, even though it's something that scares us to death, even though it's something we're unsure of, even though we don't think we're worthy. We just plow through it. We don't let that barrier of hesitation ever get in the way, thinking we're not good enough. It's, I got to survive. So that's one of the points, that people that say I don't have imposter syndrome, well, because we plow through the first part of it, we feel like we're not sufferers of this imposter syndrome. The secret is it catches up to us later. And I'll share with you is that, like I said, when I've been pointed in a direction in life, I've just kind of plowed through it, and I've taken the initial steps without fear or hesitation. I didn't think I was good enough. I just knew it was something I had to do. I felt that just innate ability to do it. And some of you out there may feel that. Others, it shows up right up front, does it not? Man, I don't know if I can do this. It takes a lot. There's a lot of study. I have to pass a test. Whatever those barriers of the initial steps are, they become overwhelming, and you suffer that imposter syndrome right up front. And so that's why I say I take this episode light. It's because I don't know what the upfront looks like. But I can share with you a, a subliminal experience, because again, I was still plowing through it, so I didn't notice it. But then after reflection and pivoting my life, for some reason, it started to affect me. And those of you like me that plow through the first part, it catches up to us in the second part. So none of us are immune to the cloud or ghosts of imposter syndrome. And that is, as I was going through, for instance, my real estate career, I think is the most vivid one, is I was plowing through in sales and listing property. And I remember always in my mind striving from the very first day of getting the big listing, right? The big like payout. And you talk to several people that just get that the big payout where they get a million, couple $1 million home, and it renders like a commission in one transaction that maybe in the beginning it took you almost a year to accomplish, and you were just like winning the lottery. I always kind of strived for that as like future growth. Again, some of it was survival, and I won't say, well, I did quit my job and go into real estate kind of cold turkey. So that being said, I guess there was that sense of survival, and I just marveled at wanting to get those big listings. I wanted to have those big transactions. I marveled the individuals that had those transactions. In fact, as I was combing through the MLS, studying the market constantly, I would come upon, oh, that property sold, and I would, dial down to see who the transactional agents were, and I went, wow, man, good for them. One day I'll be there. One day I'd like my name on that line item. It was once or twice, but I can share with you this, and I'm trying to keep this wrapped up. Is I remember being at the listing appointment, gaining that property that I was going to transact to render this obnoxious commission. And I remember prepping for it. I remember sitting for it. I remember leaving for it. I had these little hints of reminding me I was in a space I shouldn't be in. And that's where I say the ghost kind of sneaks up, is because you're all powerful and confident. And then all of a sudden it shows up and says, you're not worthy to have this great thing. You're not worthy to get the eventual outcome of this thing. And I kind of really, I didn't pay attention to it, but it's a seed is the best way to say. And it was a seed that kind of got planted. And I say that it got planted because you don't pay attention to it. You're busy powering through. So those that power through the front, yeah, we're breezing through life pretty easy on that front side. But on the back side is where it hurts worse because, again, as I've mentioned in many other episodes, you got to kill the monster when it's a baby. Those of you that have that issue up at the front of something, you're killing the monster when it's a baby. Because we've pushed that little monster away and we're catching it on the backside, well, now that little monster has almost like a quick seed effect. I think of like wildflowers. The seed falls, poop, and within a short period of time, you've got weeds everywhere. So this kind of crept in a little bit. And again, I didn't pay attention to it. I ignored it and I powered through. But I'm sharing with you this is when I decided to change my market drastically by moving 1,600 miles to a different market and reinventing basically myself in the real estate world, which I don't necessarily recommend, but I also think it was really just a thing of the times, is the value of homes in general that I was dealing with 3 times automatically, multiplied by 3 as far as value. They were way up there and they climbed even further from that point. So those that kind of paid their dues and beat up the imposter syndrome at the beginning and or found it and discovered it through long term of service, well, I found those were kind of the successful people in that business because it was just part of the times that they were dealing with. And I'm not saying it was the price of the home or the clientele or anything like that. I think it was more in my head that I was dealing with, well, and a little bit of some personal issues too, if I could just stretch, that I was in a place that maybe I didn't belong. I shouldn't have been there. So morphing all of this into a ball and creating this monster is what basically created a little bit of imposter syndrome for me. is that I was constantly being reminded I didn't belong there. And that was from, shouldn't say because, but it was from a host of multiple things. So you want to get this thing when it's a baby. Just kill that monster. And then it won't bother you in any other facets. But again, because I didn't really pay attention to it and I was surviving, I packed that monster along with all of my belongings and took it 1,600 miles with me and took it to a much more fertile ground where this monster just grew. You know that kid that you see in school that one year is, average, comes back to school the next year and he's three times the size of the rest of the class and all the basketball coaches want him. Yeah. Well, that was what this monster did. Just grew exponentially. And again, I still didn't realize it or notice it or pay attention to it because it wasn't my thing. Remember, on the front side, I didn't see it. But now all of a sudden, it was kind of on the back of the backside that I recognized there was so many other factors that were creating this mindset that I had. And that was part of, and I may have mentioned it in other episodes, was where I really just decompressed. I mean, you talk about taking air out of a balloon. I almost popped it, quite frankly, because I just had to stop and start back at the beginning with everything and start discovering where those little monsters were. And I don't want to say giving up, but I call it more of a readjustment, that things just had to stop moving for a minute in order to put them in their proper place and then begin that inertia of movement again. It was an interesting time, and I think there was several episodes that have dived into it. If not, it certainly is brought up in other episodes that I have that you'll find on this channel called Walks on the Beach, which is more of the personal side of me. Anyway, I digress. Let's get on with the show. So in this episode, we're going to unpack what imposter syndrome really is, where it comes from, and 5 grounded tools to break through and lead with confidence. So let's get started with part 1. What is imposter syndrome? I mean, really, it's not a flaw. It's a signal of growth and expansion. It's a little bit of that feeling uncomfortable doing something new. It's part of that growth process. It's part of that breaking a muscle and allowing it to grow. It's that pain after the gym. That's what this is. That's what it really is. And it typically shows up when you're doing something new. Like I said, when you're in a room with people you admire, that you look up to. When you're breaking cycles, whether that's a family, cultural, or economic cycle, again, you're doing something different. You're going away from this thing called normal, can create a little bit of sense of imposter syndrome, that maybe you're not worthy to do better than others in your family. Maybe you're not worthy of doing great things beyond the village, as they say. Or economically, you don't feel that you're worthy of the financial graces that can be granted to you by doing something above and beyond kind of what the village is doing. Back in the day, you were kind of shunned if you went outside the village. Man, if you went to another town and came back and had stories of galore, that you were shunned by the villagers to say, well, how could you leave and even consider what someone else is doing? How dare you? You can't do that. And it's just in a different way, but it still goes on today in history and with families. And families are basically our village. Imposter syndrome doesn't mean you're unqualified. It means you care deeply and you haven't yet embodied your new identity. I truly believe that was the case. My 1,600-mile move, I just didn't really, I held on to the old me, quite frankly. And I tried to do things the way I used to do them. And I always reverted back to, well, I never did things before that way. Why am I doing them now? And I can't say with certainty that doing new things was the changing factor. It was a little bit more of dialing in and adjusting how I was doing things. The the environment that I found myself in was slightly advanced. I really don't want to give a lot of credit here, but it was a different clientele. It was. And I came from more of a creative clientele. And so having to adjust a little bit and do things differently. Like I really, I was, I feel like I was a pretty good hero because look, think of this concept, right? And this is where I measure my success immensely in my real estate world. Was not only was I in the position of selling residential homes to families, I was also selling second homes to people from the Washington, D.C., Baltimore, that mid-Atlantic region. I got to share with you, it's a little bit of a challenge to encourage someone to buy a second home when they already have one. This is a completely different investment with a whole nother set of bills that are involved, with a whole nother, and most of these were in other states. So it was a completely different electric company sometimes, it was a different communication company. You were paying taxes to a different state. I mean, this was a whole nother ball of wax that people had to deal with when making this purchase. It wasn't just buying the family home, setting up the homestead, and doing the regular. I mean, this was a whole nother endeavor that you really had to share with people and offer to them the concept as well as to convince them this was a good idea. Because at first they would think about it and then go, well, I don't know, seems overwhelming. And anyway, so I felt like that was a little bit more of a challenge in my field. So again, not recognizing the imposter syndrome that was at hand, going to another world where someone already lives in a home, it's a little hard to convince them to sell that home, especially when the market was 3 to 5 times better than anywhere else on the planet, by the way. And that's not really what drove me to the market. I just feel like it was sort of a fringe benefit for my social move, my personal move. And again, the personal move didn't really congeal either to help build or to help serve myself to best combat the monster. I hope that makes sense in the way that I've delivered it. So again, convincing someone to sell a home just that they already live in to then buy another home that they need to move into just to gain equity in a market or to strategize financially, or even if they called to just say, hey, we are relocating, to be that star number one agent and to have all of the facets really became a burden for me to just financially fund, if you will, all of these things that, well, quite frankly, I already had the tools in place. I just didn't have them now in this new location. And so I was really at a level of struggle. And trust me, at a level of struggle, that is the what is it? The plant feeding, the monster food, if you will, helping this thing grow immensely is when you have all of these other peripheral things going on. Man, imposter syndrome is going to just pop up and grow unbelievably. And if you don't pay attention to see that it's coming, again, I kind of just pushed it aside while it kept growing. And as it got higher than I did, and I looked over one day and went, wow, who the hell are you? And that big monster said imposter syndrome. And I said, oh, well, I have all the confidence in the world. You're not scaring me until they got another foot taller. And then I just, man, I couldn't smash it. I eventually did. Like I said, I popped the balloon and basically started from scratch again to say, hey, how do I squash all my monsters without all of this stuff going on the peripheral? Let me squash my monsters, then get on with what I'm supposed to be doing. Get on with my supposed life. And I went on to another journey. So let's get into some powerful tools to overcome, besides just letting it grow a couple feet taller than you before you want to knock it down. Identify the voice. Is it yours or is it inherited? You know, I know the monster was whispering at me and I pushed it aside. Be a little bit more in tune to hear this voice again while it's squealing as a little baby, and to kind of squash it. And remember to it's also called like an inner critic, if you will, and give it a persona, give it a name, like Doubting Debbie or Frank the Fraud. And I think by giving it an identity, you now can start measuring and create a distance from it. You're not ignoring it, you're acknowledging it. And again, that was probably one of my flaws, is that I didn't acknowledge it and I just pushed it aside. Guarantee if I gave it a creative name, kind of punched it a little bit and pushed it away and acknowledged that I didn't want its presence, I probably wouldn't have dealt with it as much. I still am a firm believer there was other factors that were involved. So even combating this personally, um, yeah, just some other things had to take place. So learn to create that distance. Start using identity anchors when you're creating that distance with the I am statements, and put these I am statements in facts about yourself. Like I am someone who shows up. I am learning, not faking. I am worthy of this endeavor. I also, again, from this experience and sharing with you, I kind of want to also touch on the fact that you want a good support group. You know, if your family doesn't support you, that's fine. Have a circle of mentors. I have a mastermind group that I collaborate with once a week, and we lean on each other and we talk about our struggles and our challenges and things that we're going through and things that we're doing, things that are exciting, things that happen in life, and we're trying to sort of weed through them, understand them, and gain some perspective. And trust me, by having a mastermind, they will share with you things that you're not seeing. So connect with those who are part of your support group that can give you some of these I am statements, because they're seeing things about you that you might not recognize. Because trust me, while you're busy beating the crap out of this monster, you're really not paying attention to too much else in life. But by having a support group, they can share with you that you're doing okay and that you're strong. And I'm not saying the fake support. I'm not talking about your sisters and hanging out with somebody that's just going to always pump you up. I'm talking about real, honest people that are going to tell you, yeah, you blew it. You blew it good. And here's how you can do better next time. I want those honest people to be in your mastermind group, and they will start sharing with you some I am statements of things that you can't see. Stack the evidence. Make a list of your earned wins, compliments, and testimonials. You know, I remember that in real estate. Keep going back to that. But a couple of times, you know, if I had a bad day, if I had a client that just flat out rejected me and I was like crushed, how could they do that? What was it that I did wrong? And when I'd kind of combed through the past events and I was like, I did the appointment great, I did the listening great, the communication great. I told them what I could do. I was honest about what I would or wouldn't do, and explain the reasons why. And I kind of was, well, you know, some people just aren't meant for people, is what I chalked it up to. But that still doesn't, I mean, that gave it a reason, and that's fine. But it still didn't squash a little bit of my not being good enough, maybe. And so I would scroll through. I kept kind of a diary of testimonials from individuals, from past clients. And I would kind of comb through those and see those, and it would help build me up. So keep a list of things that, you know, good things that people have said, inspirational things that you read and remind you who you are. that what was the thing you read that gave that initial spark to kind of get you going? Well, keep a note of that. Keep that handy. Keep it on your phone or somewhere where when you start feeling a little undone, that you can read to get back into that space of development. And keep a proof log. Like I said, a notebook, maybe even a photo album of your successes and things that you've done, things that make you feel good, things that have demonstrated your progress, some of your wins, as they say. That way you have something to go back. Vision boards are great, but that's the future. I think a past board or a past book is great because it helps remind you where you've been and lets you know that you're not starting from the beginning. You're starting from now and from a point of learning. So keep a record of those, even if it's a journal or a sketch or just even a spreadsheet, a list of items. Put a date, put what you did. Maybe even create a column of collaboration, like you collaborated with this person, so that you can demonstrate to yourself that you're networking with other people and that your wins are falling into this guide that you set for yourself and the challenge that you set for yourself. Maybe it's communication. And so set up the wins that you're working with other individuals and not just kind of struggling through yourself. Whatever it is, create that column that you can help see visually at a quick glance. Hey, here's a series of dates. The list is going to be forever. Excel spreadsheets don't ever condense, they just get bigger. And so, yeah, there's plenty of room to put your wins and to be able to visually keep track of them. And act like you belong. Instead of trying to feel confident, practice showing up as you are. Your behavior trains your brain. In some of the workshops, we talk about physiology and kind of how you walk in a room is sort of how you set the tone and almost how you're setting how you want people to approach you and how you want to be treated. And I'm not saying you have to be pompous or glamorous or be like, I'm trying to think of one of those pop stars that always has to do something crazy. Well, Madonna was one of them. Maybe Lady Gaga, where it was just like, you don't have to be outrageous, but just show up with authenticity of the real you, with the confidence that you belong in that space and that you're supposed to be there, and with that internal energy that you have, then you're going to kind of squash the monster, right? It's those little tamps on that monster. Remember, it's a baby. And so you're just kind of stepping on its toes, quite frankly, and letting it know that it doesn't belong there. It's kind of getting in your way, and you'd really like it to go away. And just remind yourself that I'm here. I'm here to serve. I'm here to be me. I'm here to do what I need to do. When you do these, you will not feel like you don't belong in the room. You will have the confidence built that you can manage the room and control the room. And I'm not saying in that powerful way, I'm saying that you're not going to be manipulated. And that sometimes feeling like you could be manipulated can also create that imposter syndrome. And so all of a sudden your defenses come up and now you're treating things completely different. And quite frankly, you will get treated different. So again, physiology, the things that you say, and many times just being silent. Don't feel like you have to say anything and have that confidence within to know I appreciate the conversation. I belong in this room. I'm learning things and I don't have to speak. There's an old proverb or saying that says, people know what you know when they hear what you say. Sometimes just being there can be influential enough. And if somebody asks you something, you say with all confidence in a very short statement what you know, maybe even what you believe, and then leave it at that. Don't feel like you have to sell yourself in that moment. That is where I think the monster starts stepping on your toes and going, hey, tell them about this, tell them about that. And pretty soon you can sometimes diminish your position by just sort of sharing too much. And so keep that confidence up. I'll also share with you another exercise, and we do it in the workshop, and I'll just briefly share with you is get your energy up. Before you get into that room, um, pump yourself up. I know when I go on stage, I rev my RPMs up. Man, I am a race car. I am like my adrenaline is going and I'm getting going and I'm moving and shaking and it when I hit that stage it's like I ran a marathon. Not that I'm exhausted, but my energy is up and my adrenaline is up. And then once I understand the room, then I dial it down. But I don't come in with my shoulders down and just kind of, oh, here I am, and then have to try to build myself up to the room. No, you want to bring yourself down. So pump yourself up. Again, some of the mantras we've talked about, share those with yourself. Stand there in the mirror, do it in private, wherever it is. Get yourself pumped up for that space and arrive. That's going to step on the toes of imposter syndrome and remind you that not only do you are you supposed to be there, but you're supposed to be there and you have a purpose to be there. Here's a leadership insight. Well, with a little coaching prompt. What if imposter syndrome is actually proof that you're in the right room? That you're not only unqualified, you're upgrading. Everyone feels it, and everybody in that room, if they were honest, would tell you. The difference is you should act anyway like you are in that room. And the more that you exercise that muscle, like I said, pump yourself up. But the more that you act like you're supposed to be there, the more you are there. And physically, you're already there. So, man, bring your mind up to speed and bring it to the forefront that you're there. I'll reflect back that the listing that I took, that I remember driving back to the office and I had some doubt and I was like, man, I think this is the big one. This is going to be something pretty spectacular. Am I going to be able to do it? Do I have the chops? I'm stepping into new ground. Can I do what's expected of me? Is the client going to expect more? Can I make this happen? And by the time I got to the office, I had convinced myself mentally that I can do this. It's just numbers. There was some extra zeros at the end of the sale price, right? I was going to do everything I did with any other listing, which, by the way, in my world, the way I operated, which was always levels above, is I was already performing and giving those at lower listing amounts a lot more. So this was just doing my norm, doing what I always did. So it wasn't like I had to up my game. I was actually coming back to my systems, and that was where my success was. It was more of the mental capacity that started to ring in my ear, unwelcome, by the way, that I was probably stepping into some new territory that, well, maybe I shouldn't be. So in closing, you're not alone to feel like an imposter, but when you hear the whisper, you got to stop it. You got to listen and be aware that there's a whisper telling you you can't, and to squash the monster while it's a baby. See, it's not a stopping point. It's just a signpost, like a warning sign, right? Just a little warning signal. Think of it this way. You're in the car. Most modern cars have that. Some luxury cars absolutely don't have it, which I always was fascinated by. But your turn signal, right? You put the turn signal on, you got the little light flashing on the dash, and you hear a little click, 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 letting you know, well, it's actually an electrical mechanism clicking, but it sort of is an audible to let you know that your turn signal is on, right? So it's just an indicator. So when you hear this whisper, it's an indicator. It's letting you know, hey, you're in new territory. Squash the monster. And the monster's going to come back. It really is. But you need to just be listening for it and recognize, hey, oh, imposter syndrome kicking in. Guess what? Not going to play on this round. And you go into your mantras. And you'll find that all of a sudden it becomes an unconscious event that you're going to perform through yourself. And pretty soon the monster, even when you see the shadow of the monster showing up, you're already in the mode of telling it to go away. You're never going to get rid of it because as you are leveling up in life, the monster's going to keep showing up. But recognizing where it's coming from and pushing it aside gets you that much further, that much faster. So use the 5 tools. Remember, we're going to name our monster. We're going to identify the anchors of the things that are going to try to root us, family, culture, economics. We're going to stack the evidence. Remember, we're keeping journals and keeping an identity of kind of what we've done. And so reflect back to your evidence and look back at it as often as you need to. And remember, not only physiologically pump yourself up and act like you belong. I remember hearing the term, kind of going back to starting in real estate, there's a lot of trainers and teachers would say, fake it till you make it. And I was like, that didn't resonate with me because I don't want to be fake, but I just acted like I belonged there. I remember my first listing. They didn't know it was my first listing. And I kept telling myself that. And I acted like it was my 100th listing. And then I answered the questions like I already knew the answers. I will say a lot of that was studying and being so prepared and watching game film, if you will. I won't express the medium of the game film because that will certainly date me, but I watched the game film and I watched countless times of how the conversation was going. So when I sat down to my first one, I acted like it was my 100. And I kept reeling back in the game film that I saw to be able to combat certain questions. And if it was something that I wasn't sure of and didn't want to give the wrong answer, again, I knew what I knew. I just didn't know having been there before, right? So when I was posed with a question that I didn't, I said, that is an interesting concept, and that is not something I normally look into, but I'm glad that you brought that up, and I can certainly, through further investigation, get that information and get it back to you. And many times it was just like they wanted to say something. They wanted to have that, they wanted to be a well-informed customer or client. And so they would ask questions. And many times it turned out to be nothing. But when I found myself in that position, I framed the room to have that confidence. And that's what you need to do is, if you get caught off guard, it's not that you're an imposter. It's just, well, maybe that was a new question. And just say, hey, that is a great question. And that wasn't something that I normally pay attention to. And there's some details involved. So to give you the specific right answer, let me do some research and I will get back to you within a day. And that usually squashed it. So I invite you to download the Imposter Syndrome Breakthrough Sheet, write your new identity statements and evidence list this week. Start today. Share one bold action with hashtag I am becoming and tag it at Ask Adam Live. You're not faking it. You're facing it. And that's what real leadership looks like. Now let's go out and beat imposter syndrome together, as it's continuously going to try to bother us throughout our day. This has been Ask Adam Live. Let us go out together and make it a great day.